Well, thank you. All three of you have already stimulated numerous questions in my mind, and we're going to jump right into this. And I will confess, we've met on Zoom, and that triggered a email conversation that got a little bit spunky and interesting along the way. And so we're going to pick right up kind of in the middle of that in the interest of time, and maybe in the hopes of figuring out evolutionary leaps. So our original conversation revolved around this idea of, can evolution make a leap? Is it a gradual developmental process, or are there moments when maybe we can take a leap and or accelerate the evolutionary processes, as Holly referenced here? So let's start with that. Do we have leaps, or is this a painstakingly slow evolutionary Darwinian thing that we're all struggling with? How do you feel about that?
Well, I'll go first, since you and I apparently disagree on some of the points, and in a friendly way. I don't believe in leaps. However, as paleontology discovered a few decades back, punctuated equilibrium in which species change very rapidly over geological time is very real. The only thing unreal about it is it doesn't happen instantly. In real time, it really takes thousands of years. But I believe people change very quickly, and certainly wouldn't argue that that's not true, because when all the pieces are in place, it is when a person's done the work, they've done the meditation, they've organized their mind and thinking in a way that they're ready to change. I think they can change very rapidly, and so it's effectively a quantum jump. I guess I just don't want to believe it is a kind of instant thing, but it's very quick. Maybe it is instant. So I'll back up a little on my stubbornness, but I do think people change quickly if they're prepared to do it. I also think in particular, as a psychologist, I think about cognitive personality development. I don't think that's quite as fast for most people, but emotional changes in generosity, changes in openness of spirit and so on, those things can happen very quickly, like Paul on the road to Damascus. I mean, was he a different guy when he got to Damascus? I suspect not, but he certainly had a different attitude about the world. So how's that for being...
Okay, good, thank you.
I'll take the next
Leap?
tactic, given this was my rogue idea, and I'm really glad your thinking is malleable. Perhaps that's a leap. Leslie? In my work as a practitioner, a lot of what I do, at least I'd say 40–50% of my work with people in the transformational process of living into purpose is really about clearing the shadow. And some of that is energetic. I'm also a witch. This is a safe place to acknowledge that. And it's really deep work, as anybody who's done shadow work knows, and it requires many different forms of investigation and introspection. And in that process of liberating the energy that's stuck in one's biologic and subtle energy structures, there is a shift that can't be explained by normal human dynamics, the human development structures that we know about academically. And the reason I can speak to this with some level of confidence is because I have studied all of those things, and as an academic and an intellectual, I also use that work. But I notice there's just this energetic pop that happens for some people overnight. Literally, we can be in a session and struggle. You do some work, and then the very next day, it's a whole new world. And whether or not that's a quantum leap, I'm not really qualified to say, and I haven't measured it in enough detail to know that it's truly something evolutionary that's happening. But what I know is that it doesn't have to be the painstakingly slow, deliberate grind that we've been used to, we've been accustomed to in humanity that might take a year or a decade to work through. It can happen much faster because we now have technologies and methodologies, based in painstaking research and otherwise, that can move us to a new place very quickly.
I will just interject for 10 seconds to agree with you.
Yay!
Stanislav Grof, who's done all the work on consciousness, has a brother, less known in Canada, who's a psychiatrist and has specialized in depression. And he told me once that it's not all biological, there's subtle energies involved. And I said, well, why do you think that? He said, because people change too quick. They come out of the depression, there's instant change. So I'm with you on that. Go for it.
Yay.
Great.
Well,
go ahead, Eleanor.
I'm not quite landing in the context of the question very well, but my contribution would be I've enjoyed in the conversations here this weekend the recontextualizing and reframing of concepts that we've been working with for a while, like the conversation yesterday about wellness, moving from hedony to eudaimonia. I was going to say that on stage, eudaimonia. Creating space for the new thing to emerge. So speed's not totally my thing, so it's hard for me to think about a leap and a jump and an increase, but I do love looking at making sure that we're thinking outside of the current paradigm. We don't know what's there, but imagining enough to get there in whatever amount of time that we can.
Yeah. Did you have another comment? No, we can move on. Okay, so we've got sort of some attempts at agreement here, but I'm going to push the subject a little bit, mainly because I'm worried about the state of things in the world. And I think, as I pointed out in my opening talk, we're running out of time a little bit. And so I'm not sure that we can wait for sort of normal evolution to take its route, and that we do need some kind of acceleration in our processes here. And we've talked about this as a group, but I'd just like to go into that a little more deeply. Hala, you have said you've witnessed kind of leaps in people's behavioral changes as a result of working with some of your clients. Do you want to go into that a little bit more deeply and explain how maybe that happens?
Most of my clients are at the latter stages of human development consciousness. So most of them are what you would call green or teal or higher. A few of them are in the orange stage. So it's kind of like graduate school. And so most of these people are not early stage, they're not beginners in the whole field of human development and personal development. And what I notice is they come committed to living into their future, and which requires courage. And the level of courage that's required to face all of the discomfort and uncertainty that's on the other side of where they are is some of what enables them, with support, to grasp onto things. So there's this readiness, there's this hunger, the longing that was spoken to earlier. And in that process, then so what we do is I teach them to listen for the things that are coming toward them. So it's almost an energetic quality of noticing the very thing on the other side of where you are. And I know all of you have experienced it. You can, when somebody's about to call or somebody's walking towards you or things are happening and you just get this gut sense, you can call it intuition. We all have access to that energetic realm, and most of us don't recognize it as evolution coming toward us. And so grasping onto the thing that's next, whether it's uncomfortable or not, is a welcome scenario in the movement toward accelerating evolution. So one of the things that's really required in this work to accelerate evolution is recognizing that absolutely everything is perfect and purposeful. We like to think of ourselves as victims in life, and you have to actually give up that notion and recognize that everything is going to give us something that is evolutionary. And when you do that, more is accessible and available to use as fodder for the very next stage and the next stage and the next stage. So some of the acceleration is really about grabbing onto those things that are heading toward us and welcoming them, because they're going to be the material for the next piece that we need in our own evolution.
I'll add on to that by saying that I wrote an article years ago called Conversations for a Better World, which actually got me more invitations to speak around the world than any other article I've ever written. It has very little to do with consciousness directly, but has a lot to do with, what is it, the 8 degrees of Kevin Bacon, or how many degrees is it? The number of people you interact with daily, and who interact with other people. The number is very large. And there's, I think, more than enough research to understand that whoever you are, I mean, you don't have to be out preaching on the soapbox or something, just being the kind of person that is facilitating and emanating goodwill and caring about others. It's contagious. It's contagious, and other people pick it up, and you better other people's lives just a little bit, but it continues to build. We've learned more about these networks of connections now. We know that you know someone right here in the front who knows all kinds of people around the world, and if we influence Emanuel a little bit, I mean, I was talking to Irvin Laszlo once about this. He says, this is a nice little paper. I'm going to take it and give it to what was his name, the last premier of the Soviet Union at an international meeting next week. I don't know him, but the point I want to make is that I think it's really true and defensively true that little things you do in the person you are from day to day doesn't have to be heroic. It just has to be kind, thoughtful, and caring, and interact in positive ways with people around you. And this spreads. And has ripple effects way out. As long as I've got the microphone, I'll run on for a minute longer, and then you can chase me off the stage. But there's been some very good research on how to change society, and it doesn't take a lot of people. Probably the best example is the Quakers. It's just a very, very small religion in America, less than 10%, I think probably less than 5%. And they have given birth to all kinds of social movements. The changes in the penal system, women's rights, abolition, the list goes on and on. And the characteristics that such change makers have is an absolute dedication to change. That it's understood that they may not live to see. I may not live to see the fruit of this. I may not get credit for it. You have to be willing to do the work without getting credit for it. You're just doing the work because you believe in it. And if you look at the history of these very powerful social changes that the Quakers initiated, abolitionists are a very good example. The abolitionists as a whole, back in the days of the Civil War, did not expect to be thanked by anyone. Many of them didn't think they would live long enough to make a difference, and yet they did. So I think this is relevant to consciousness, of course, because consciousness gives us the kind of purpose we need. But I'm talking about purpose here. I'm talking about dedication to values that we all believe in, whether it's abolition or overcoming the poor Or, you know, we've got loads and loads of research that says we could really, really, really overcome terrorism in the world if we just educated women and, you know, put half the money into providing people decent living conditions and education for women that we put into guns, for example. So I think there's a lot we can do, and I'll try to not run on and on.
Agreed.
Please.
Agreed. And the little things on a daily basis are huge. And part of what I'm hearing in the question is yes, and more, and more. We need more. Emanuel's worried. I'm experience worry too, and I've been kind of digging into that feeling a little bit, and I'm worried about the earth. I'm worried about people. But I dug into it, and like some of that's that, and some of that is just this pain within myself. You know, yes, the earth is tormented, but I am terrified on a regular basis, and I've really pulled that out and tried to look at that and how I can work with that and how we can work with that. And I think that terror that I feel is my purpose calling me. And I think a lot of people feel that right now, and it's isolating because it is my own. I have my very own unique purpose, and every other person in the world has the same. And that awareness is a little terrifying. So I think accelerating the evolution of purpose is, Holly, like you do, just having our guides. I need my coaches, I need my astrologer to help me talk to that terror and these voices inside me. And I'm growing in my ability to do the same for others. And we've talked a lot this weekend about that web and the map and the mandala and all of us as pieces in it, creating the whole and supporting one another. Many things swimming, let me pick one. I think my experience of my purpose as pain is in part that the current paradigm is not adequate to support my full expression of it yet. So I think some structural systems are in order, and some improvement of current systems. I'm particularly interested in ways of working together organizationally and moving into more of a non-hierarchical win-win paradigm with how we work together. I'm a student of the COS, the Collaborative Operating System, which is being used more and more. And in Amovea Mundi, we use that as our operational system. And it's also used in the workshops when we bring people together. And in Israel, it's a situation where people that are coming together disagree on almost everything. But they align that we came together to identify the higher purpose of our country, and they do it without disagreement. And that's, I think, because their purpose calls, they agree that purpose it's there. But then we also have an operational system that is not based on getting around disagreement. The disagreement's not even there.
Okay. Jim? Yeah.
Just a really quick follow-up. One of the things that's become really certain to me is that we can't do this alone, that evolution, to accelerate evolution, it really has to be in collaboration or in relationship. And so a lot of my work is really beginning to go past the individual and create community and organizations, business, et cetera. And I know a lot of people here do that work also or already. And to recognize that even when we are individually becoming on purpose, it's challenging to maintain and continue that forward momentum by ourselves.
It is. Let's look at some of the positive things. I mean, as Eleanor was saying, and you were following up here, and Leslie mentioned with the Quakers that there's this element of a great idea catches on and does become contagious. We know from the work of sociologist James Fowler things that good ideas are contagious, and your behavior not only influences your friends, it influences their friends, and on down the line there is a ripple effect of everything we do. So I guess my question in that regard, and we've already discussed this a little bit, is do you believe in this critical mass element of a good idea taking hold and spreading itself, purpose as an attractor, for an example? Can that hold the field and accelerate the process? Do we have this critical mass factor in our favor?
I believe we do. I mean, if you've studied diffusion of innovations, we know, whether it's fact or not, but the theory holds that there is a requirement to at least have some level of a collective field to draw forward society in a particular way. And I'm of the belief that we have reached a tipping point. I'm seeing, as I mentioned, 12 years ago, I was attempting to do this work and nobody was following because it didn't make sense to anybody. Either. We weren't far enough along at a stage of consciousness that there were enough people who really grasped that there was something to align with. And now we are at a space in time and humanity, all illusory, that there is in fact an impulse for us to follow individually and collectively, and that it is our role here on the planet, otherwise why would we be here, to live into that impulse and contribute to each other, not just to our own lives, but to each other, to have this greater beingness. So and I think we've reached that stage. Whether or not it's too late is the question. That's
Well, we're hoping it's not too late.
That's why I'm like,
and that's why we're
accelerate,
here together this weekend to accelerate that. Yeah.
Well, the research that I've seen suggests it takes 10% to shift the population. And once you get up to 10%, something can really become contagious. So we're not the only ones talking about purpose, of course. It's really spreading all around. So I think our big hope is that we'll reach that 10% and it will break out as a major movement.
Do we have 10%, do you think? I've read statistics that say, depending on how you measure it, what the questions are, but I've read statistics that there's perhaps as much as 20% of the U.S. population sympathetic with what we're talking about right here.
I would agree with you. It's at least that there is some interest in and movement toward purpose with at least a little p. Whether we've reached 10% of people who are truly aligned is questionable, but there is definitely that much interest, and it reflects the shift. And I personally believe it reflects the shift in consciousness levels that are occurring on the planet that makes us more available for that broader perspective about what our role is here.
I think the shift is indeed wide and influencing many, many people to various degrees. It's big and it's important and it's spreading. I think one of the real challenges is how to move it into the political realm so that it will, it will be legislated, legislation will follow. One of the congressmen yesterday, or was it the day before yesterday, put a bill before the legislature to deny tax credits for people who are suffering fire damage, although they're going to continue with water or with flooding. Well, you know, that's just mean. You know, West Coast, that's all. So we need to somehow move away from those kinds of politics and back to, you know, I'm hoping in the next elections people will see what happened when they didn't vote, and maybe they'll come out and maybe we'll see a shift. Because I mean, in all these issues, gun control, on and on, you know, the majority of the population are liberal. It's the ones that seem to have their hands on power and money. So that's a big challenge. I think that's a big challenge for the future. I just came back from China. You know, it's not a fascist state, but it is authoritarian, and no doubt about that. And they're way, way in front of every other country in the world on ecological issues and worrying about the earth for whatever reasons. And Russia's getting on board with that. So it's time that we can implement some of our ideals. And as I tell my students, please, please vote. Because all of this is going on because people have gone home and said, oh, I don't know, make any difference what I do. And of course, the worst elements go vote every time, if you don't mind my saying so. So anyway, thank you.
Are you seeing evidence of that, Eleanor? You're working with countries as a whole, Israel and Colombia. Is it working?
It is. Our project is working. The scaling of it now will take its time because it's something new for people to understand and understand that it's theirs if they want it. In this question, I'm hearing that this critical mass amount is us, this percentage of people that work with purpose and do purpose work. And then I hear that call that we're challenging ourselves with the very question, can we do it? Can we do this thing that we want so badly, that calls us, and that challenge has been spoken many times this weekend, and I've been grateful for it. I have stepped more into my purpose this weekend. So if purpose can become more a part of conversation, and we do have guides around us, then that's how it happens. I can't give a time frame and a schedule to that, but I do see it happening and feel it happening for myself. And then I want to add that bringing purpose to our political system and other institutions is also very possible using the many different methodologies that we have, all of our complementary practices. The True Purpose community has worked on the higher purpose of religion, law, relationships, fear, horses, using that methodology to identify the higher purposes of a lot of our institutions. And so yeah, we could find the higher purpose of U.S. democracy together. It's a step-by-step process. Whether or not the conditions are present for that is kind of the first step in the process. Tim tells me that it's not time for the U.S. to find its purpose yet. The conditions are not right. But it's relatively easier to find the higher purpose of these collective things than to find one's individual purpose. It's much less scary for me to think about finding the higher purpose of my country than to think about finding my own and then possibly having to find a way to live it and manifest it is terrifying. But yeah, let's hang out and find what is the higher purpose of the entertainment industry is possible work that is happening.
Let me just add that it doesn't have to be terrifying or scary. It's really not that hard. We have so many tools available to us now to do this that there's really no reason whatsoever for anybody on the planet not to be living in purpose.
It can be actually very stimulating and exciting and joyful.
It's actually fun.
Yeah. I agree. So let's take this one step further here. So we've agreed that there's at least this acceleration process involved here, but let's go to purpose itself. And there's been all this reference to higher purpose. So my question would be, Leslie referenced Irvin Laszlo and his book, The Intelligence of the Cosmos, which is available right over here. And Irvin explains that the universe is most definitely purposeful. Does that purpose have the ability to evolve itself? Or is it standard? Was it present at the Big Bang? There is this kind of eros, this evolutionary drive, but is it constant? Or do we, sitting here together at the Purpose Summit talking about this stuff, do we have the ability to give some kind of feedback to actually evolve higher purpose to an even higher state?
I'm definitely not an expert in the evolution of the state of the cosmos. I have studied Nassim Haramein's work in unified theory of physics this year, just because I wanted to understand how it applies to purpose. And I know that it does it on its own, that we have some influence, but we are just a part of the larger whole, and that it is evolving. And so to the extent that you call the impulse of the cosmos purpose, which is really my conception of it, that we are following the impulse of the organic nature of evolution, and we call it something like purpose because it exists within us as source energy, then we are just a representation of the evolution of that within the larger whole. So I would argue yes, that it does evolve from that perspective.
Well, I would say, probably consistent with Irvin Laszlo, that the universe is saturated in purpose at every level, and evolution is moving forward all the way from the quantum level of quantum physics up through the human brain, up through the human spirit. At every level, things are moving in the direction of higher complexity and broader domain and more expression of creativity in the spirit. I think we've reached the point, though, where we're, and I'm the guy that doesn't like quantum leaps, but, we've moved into a new domain now of self-creation, in a way, of conscious self-evolution. So it's fallen into our hands to accelerate things. I mean, if we stick around long enough and the Earth isn't destroyed, we'll all get there, I think. But that's a big if. And in fact, our will to greater purpose and greater spiritual dimensions is part of what is evolving in the human spirit. So it's just part of the process, but it's a very important part of the process. And right now, of course, there's sort of a race to how accurately and effectively we can express these ideals before we're overcome by ecological crises and other crises. But yeah, I think there's purpose at every level. And it's right up in front. You don't have to look too far to find it. Look in your dreams, look in your inner life. Look in your meditation, look around you at what other people are doing, look at society, look at organizations like this, look at people like Emanuel over here. It's all going on all around us.
Yeah, I feel it. Does purpose itself evolve? Does it evolve itself? I can't even get my head around that. I think it would require me to give some sort of concrete material definition to purpose, which I'm not able to do right now for whatever reason, but I do agree that it's present and pervasive.
So let's take it one step further here. Yesterday we had a wonderful conversation with Barbara Marks Hubbard. She's now doing an online seminar called Awakening the New Species. She thinks we're on the verge as a species of an evolutionary leap, that Homo universalis is right around the corner, maybe even already present here on Earth. I'd just like to ask the audience, how many of you out there think the next evolutionary leap to Homo universalis is possible in your lifetime? Whoa, yay. All right. We're going to call that critical mass. How about the rest of you? Comments, thoughts on
Yeah, finally, the aliens arrived.
We are the aliens. What are you talking about? I absolutely believe that we're headed toward a different version of ourselves, that humanity will not be just a skin bag living in a material world, that the presence and awareness about the subtle anatomy and its absolute existence in this time is evidence that we're shifting, and we're becoming more self-aware at every level of consciousness.
I'm all in favor of it.
Sounds like a good idea, right? States of consciousness-wise, Leslie, that's your forte. Can we find a newer, higher, improved state of consciousness?
Well,
for the
I
human
think
species?
they were found thousands of years ago. It's just a matter of inhabiting them for a little bit larger period of time,
Okay.
which more and more people are doing. I mean, if you get out, and of course, maybe it's because I live in the Bay Area here that I see it all the time, but gosh, there are just so many different ways and so many different people that seem to be experiencing non-dual awareness and other advanced, what you call spiritual states of consciousness. It seems to be contagious in a way too. So certainly the interest in exploring what you might call advanced or higher, or at least more open or non-dual states of consciousness, it's becoming very common in this part of the world, and I know it's going on other places in Europe, and I just came from China, and there was a lot of interest there. So consciousness is catching on.
Well, it sounds like a good idea, so yeah. All right, well, we just got a couple of minutes left. I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to just take half a minute or so, and any closing thoughts on our conversation today, the evolution of purpose, what that might mean. So each of you want to share some thoughts?
Well, I'll just say briefly, in my trip to China, I was at a very large conference on consciousness and spiritual development, and offered assistance at CIS, where I'm at. We haven't cultivated that quite yet, but it looks like there's some real resources that are willing to come our way. I later found out that the conference itself, which was very well funded, I've never been to anything like it in my life before, somewhere way in the back has the Chinese publicity department behind it, and I've been a little disturbed about that. But on the other hand, hey, if China's going this way, that's got to be good. So yeah, I think that consciousness and developing higher states of consciousness and developing what we used to call, and still do, human potentials is catching on all over the place.
Very good.
I would agree with you, Leslie. And even more exciting than the notion or the pattern of awakening is the fact that most of us are becoming, or more of us are becoming embodied. and really living into our potential through actual manifesting our purpose in the world. And that's really the point of living into purpose, is that we actually have an impact here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have come into the world as material beings. So that is what I am attempting to evoke, an acceleration of us living into the thing, the doing that we're here to do, and is in addition to the being.
Yeah, I want to say if anyone is interested in chatting more about the True Purpose methodology and the Purpose of Israel project, please chat with me. And I'm recalling a question from yesterday. Our videographer friend, Bright Being, asked something about just how do I make a decision? How do we make a decision? And the answer then, and a lot of the conversation of the weekend has been the tools and the practices, and just that rootedness together in the work is profound and important. And then another thing I wanted to say on stage that Dustin said earlier, that we are standing as sons together.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're bringing this to a close. I'd like to reference Ervin Laszlo one last time on this, because he really does come around in that book to say that maybe part of our purpose is to contribute back to consciousness itself. And Ervin also says, you know, people don't see what they can't believe. And sometimes there's all kinds of things, new things out there that are really very visible. But if we don't believe they can exist, we probably won't see them. So I would just ask all of us, in the stretches of our imagination, for the power of purpose and this whole summit, to maybe, if it's not a quantum leap in your actual species, maybe make a leap of faith and believe that there's a higher level, a higher consciousness. That is our purpose. To re-inhabit it, it's probably always been there, as Leslie says, but let's rediscover it and bring it home once again to our higher purpose. Thank you all. Eleanor, Leslie, Holly, thank you all for sharing this moment with us.